You're listening to the Grow Real Estate Investing Podcast, an intelligent real estate investing how-to community where we break down the sometimes complicated real estate investing techniques into straightforward, simple to understand, and easy to follow components. No schemes, just the well-exercised foundational basics of real estate investing. Join us as together we dive into the world of real estate investing success and further release the real estate investor inside.
Welcome to the Grow Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm Joe White, and today I'm going to go over the methods on how you can find discounted investment properties to buy. First, why discounted properties? Why? Because most successful real estate investing strategies are reliant on buying property at a discount, meaning most investors need to buy property for less than the property is worth to make their investment approach work. It doesn't matter if you're looking to flip property, buy and hold rental property, or wholesale to others to buy it. It will likely be important to you to get the property for less than its market value. What we're talking about is equity. Equity is the amount the property is worth, minus what is owed on it. I most often champion the strategy of forcing appreciation with rental properties, and this is commonly called value add or the BRRRR method. What makes this strategy so attractive is that you are recycling the same money again and again, reusing it to buy rental property after rental property instead of saving additional money, all while correcting cash flow along the way. This strategy relies upon you having the equity to take back out of the property. In fact, it often relies upon you having at least 25% equity if you don't want to have to add more money to that initial investment. But it needs to be said that it's okay to leave money in the deal if you don't reach the equity threshold. But the more money you have, the more advantaged you will be. With this strategy, you will be forcing the property to appreciate, forcing it to be worth more than you owe on it. And you do this to create equity. And you'll be trying to do this in two ways. The first would be with improvements like strategic renovations. The second would be by starting out with as much equity as you can as you leave the settlement table. It's common to hear in the property investment world that you make your money going into a deal when you buy it. Because it's important to have equity the moment you buy property and it becomes yours. And this is for several reasons. Number one, a safety buffer. Probably the most important reason to get discounted property is for safety reasons. Buying property at a discount and having instant equity at the moment it becomes yours is your safety net. If a house is worth $100,000 and you buy it for $90,000, you have a $10,000 safety net if something goes wrong. If the market goes down by 10%, or if a low appraisal comes in when you try to sell it or refinance it, or if an unexpected expense comes up like a surprise bad foundation, you'll have an extra $10,000 to buffer these problems. The more of a discount you get, the more of a buffer you'll have. Equity is always your best exit strategy. Many times, equity is your only exit strategy. Remember, if you need to, you can sell the property or refinance it, but you will need equity to do it unless you're willing to take a loss. 2, refinance lender minimums. I'm a big fan of rental properties, and if you're relying on doing a cash out refi to get your money equity back out so you can reinvest it or pay off your lenders, you will typically only be allowed to take out a percentage of the equity and that you have in the property. Most common is a lender will loan you 75% of what the property is worth, requiring you to leave 25% equity in the property to cover that risk. This is called loan to value or LTV. For this reason alone, you will likely need a discount because the improvements you do to the property, like renovations, will probably need a lot of help to get you there. So number 3, cash flow. Cash flow is the money the property makes each month in profit. Equity makes you wealthy. Cash flow keeps you safe and makes sure you can pay the bills, including if costly problems arrive. You want the property to be worth more than you owe because a property worth more will likely rent for more. And the lower the debt you owe, the higher the cash flow will be. We hope the rent we collect will give us cash flow, and buying at a discount certainly helps that. So you need to buy property at a discount, and this is where many investors get stuck. They have the money, They have the knowledge. They don't have the discounted property leads. And that's the meat of this podcast, how to find discounted property. So hold on a second. Let me take a drink. This is going to be a long podcast. Okay. So how do we find discounted property? Well, first we need to hold on just a little bit longer as there's some important considerations. One, every real estate market is different, and every point in the economic cycle is different. What isn't working great in one city might work incredibly in yours. And as the real estate market changes, going up and going down, so will the results of the different lead marketing techniques. But also your competition will have an impact on your marketing for leads. It's common to have a competitor saturate the lead source, drying up your leads, or the competitor stops marketing altogether and the leads start pouring in. I recommend you use the red light, green light approach. Diversify your sources of leads. Certainly have more than one way to get them. If a lead source is producing, you green light it and begin funding it to increase the leads. If it's not producing more than it's costing you in money or time, you red light it and barely invest in it. But no, lead sources can change at any time, so you might want to keep a few fishing lines in the water. 2, for a seller to sell you the property at a discount, they will likely also need equity to do it. If a seller owes a mortgage of $40,000, they will have difficulty selling you that property for $30,000 because they still have to pay back that lender the $40,000. In order to sell that property for less money they will need to pay back, they will need to take money out of their pocket to do it. They would have to show up to the settlement table with their own money and sell the property at a loss. There are short sales where the seller does just that, or the lender agrees to accept less. But seeking a seller where you have to convince them to lose money might not be an easy source of leads, unless the seller is already seeking a short sale. I have a separate podcast on short sales, so check that out if you're interested. So, okay, how do you know if a seller or your source of possible property leads have equity or not? Well, you might not always know, but you look for those groups that are likely to have equity, and I'll explain more on that in a bit. But you can see what mortgages they have in public records. But number 3, willing sellers versus reluctant sellers. Sellers that come to you require far less effort than sellers that you approach. Remember, your time equals money. If a property is listed on the MLS where real estate agents post properties for sale, that is a willing seller who is waiting and is asking for an offer. Calling a landlord or someone with a distressed property, or someone with a property that has city violations on it, or approaching someone who hasn't indicated an interest in selling at all will typically require far more effort. They will be apt to be far more difficult to deal with, and they'll be far less likely to sell. Now, the reason you might want to approach owners of properties that are not currently for sale is that you lose most of the competition for these properties, and your chances of getting a deal can go way up. There are property owners that are so adverse to inconvenience that they put off selling their property even though they really want to sell it. For some sellers, selling a property feels extremely heavy, and you can lighten that load. There are overwhelmed sellers who will simply take the path of least resistance, and money is sometimes far less valuable to them than avoiding any discomfort, embarrassment, or effort. When deciding that what sources of discounted properties leads to go after, you'll need to balance the cost versus your time, cost of money, all while considering the discount. How much time do you have? How much does that time cost you? How much money are you willing to invest to get property leads? And how much hassle are you willing to tolerate? There are lead sources with far less competition, lead sources with willing sellers, lead sources that require far less time, and lead sources that require a lot more effort. There are also lead sources that are near free and lead sources that are extremely expensive. So let's break down different lead sources of discounted property. We're going to look at their pros versus their cons and how best to get them. But first, you need to understand that you'll need to analyze each lead for yourself. You cannot rely upon the lead source to do it for you. Obviously, the person selling you something will tend to tell you how incredibly valuable it is. This includes real estate agents, wholesalers, and property sellers. I have a podcast on evaluating properties. So check that out. But sources of leads. Number one, wholesalers. A wholesaler has a contract to buy a property that they are interested in selling you. A professional wholesaler works to find properties, hopefully at a discount. The idea is that the seller will get the agreed upon amount, the wholesaler will get their fee, and the investor will get a property at a discount. Wholesalers typically maintain a list that they blast their properties to. Getting on these lists is extremely easy, as the wholesaler wants to find buyers that will buy these properties. To find these wholesalers and get on their list, you should search the internet for them and contact them directly. They often have websites, they're on real estate investing forums and social media. A lot of these places you can post that you're looking for wholesalers and they'll find you. For example, comment here on this podcast what you're looking for, be it lending, loaning partners, to mentor someone, or that you're looking for discounted properties or wholesalers, and let that comment go to work for you. Wholesalers are people, and as such, some are better than others, and their knowledge in their estimates will be more, some will be more accurate, some will be far off of the mark. So just pay attention, because wholesalers will often blast the property to other wholesalers who will in turn add their own fee on top of the cost. It's not uncommon to see the same property listed with several wholesalers. And the original one who actually has the contract to buy the property has it discounted without the extra middleman fee. 2, word of mouth. People don't tune into this podcast to hear common sense stuff they think they already know. But since many of you will not see word of mouth as the valuable source of leads that it is, here we are. So you need to hear this. Friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, basically everyone you meet is a potential source of discounted leads, far more than you think. Anyone half considering selling their property is a potential discounted property for you to buy. Selling to you means they can just be done with it. No interviewing agents, no endless showings. They can avoid all the hassle. Plus, they can sell to you for 6% less than if they list with a real estate agent, since they avoid that commission. A 6% lower deal also means they avoid paying transfer tax on that additional 6%, essentially putting even more money in the seller's pocket. It's important for you to let everyone you buy property off market. Take a moment to create your elevator speech. You don't have to sell anyone anything. I recommend you don't. You merely state what you do and what you're looking for, and people will bring you deals. The more people you tell, the more deals you will get. This podcast provides me with property leads, partnership leads, mentors, clients, friends, and people willing to invest with me through private lending. This podcast means a lot of different things to me, but one of those is that it's my announcement to the world who I am, what I want, and what I am capable of providing others. And people who have wants and needs that can be satisfied by my wants and needs see that here and they come to me. Word of mouth is a free source of property leads, and typically from willing, easy to deal with property sellers. 3, the multiple listing service, the MLS. The MLS is one of my favorite places to find discounted property. I understand this surprises many of you. The MLS is extremely low cost. It's extremely efficient, and it requires very little of my time. These two factors make the investment into finding leads on the MLS to be very little. The sellers are more willing. They're actually selling their property after all. The MLS has discounted properties on it. You just need to know how to find them or how to scrape it. I have a podcast on finding deals on the MLS. I highly recommend you watch it. In fact, I have podcasts on each of these methods on finding property leads that you can watch, but the MLS one might convince you. Number 4, direct mail. Direct mail is a higher cost, lower effort source of property leads, though it can be higher effort than using a wholesaler, word of mouth, or the MLS. You're creating a mail piece or having it created, mailing it, and responding to the response. Designers aren't typically expensive, or you can use a preset template. And you need a list to mail to. You can canvass an entire neighborhood, or you can concentrate just by using a list of more likely candidates. As I mentioned earlier, that a seller will likely need equity to be able to sell you at a discount. So you can target those people directly. You can get lists of property owners that are over a certain age threshold, list of people like those involved in a probate process. Probate leads are interesting as these people often have equity and they are often very, very overwhelmed. Real estate investor can provide an easy solution for them at a time they really need solutions. So they're often willing to sell the properties at a discount. You can get list of those with violations against their properties and list of landlords and absentee owners. These lists aren't overly expensive and they can be found on services or through a skip tracer. A skip tracer is someone whose job it is to compile these lists. Here's the rub. To be effective, direct mail typically requires multiple pieces be sent to the same individual. It can take 7 mail pieces to begin giving you a return. But the more pieces you send, the greater the return tends to be. Plus, direct mail typically does lend itself to the green light, red light approach. If you are mailing to 1,000 people and it's paying off, you can green light it by doubling or tripling or quadrupling the number of people you're sending. Plus you can refine it once you begin seeing a demographic of who actually is interested. If it's the lower priced properties you're sending to that are responding, you'll see that. Older or younger sellers, you will begin seeing that. The plus side of direct mail is that it doesn't take a lot of effort to send out a mail piece if you're using a service. The downsides are that it can be costly, especially since you likely need to fund several mail pieces, before you get a return. Also, expect angry responses. And by angry, I mean threaten to kill you angry. Something about direct mail, cold calling, door knocking, and bandit signs trigger an intense side you might not be mentally ready for. You got to learn to be thick-skinned and try to be detached. Having compassion for these people helps me kind of deal with it. Number 5, driving for dollars. It's basically driving and looking for properties you think might be candidates. You then seek out their addresses through a skip tracer, tax records, or using a service. This can be a hard way to find properties, but it's effective and it can be free. Or you can jump further into door knocking. Stop your car and knock. It's not for the meek, and that's why I suggest everyone try it. You want a fast sales education? Try doing it face-to-face with angry doors getting slammed in your face. Face-to-face, you're going to get questions and comments you won't have answers to, but you'll have those answers burned into your brain when you leave. And when you come across an easier seller, it'll be like a walk in the park. Number 6, cold calling. The phone is an inexpensive way to build your property portfolio. It can be as free as long as you have a phone, but you might want to use a dialing service as they typically will organize your leads. It's common to hear, call me in 6 months, and you're going to want a system to manage all that. So cold calling isn't for the meek either, but it will sales train you fast and you will find property deals. If you cold call for 45 minutes a day or an hour a day, 5 days a week, it's going to make you passively wealthy. You can find leads to call by calling landlords that you find on Craigslist or Zillow. You can use a service to provide you the contacts or a skip tracer. Believe it or not, landlords are a very good source of potential leads. Very few rental property owners educate themselves, and their management of their investment suffers. When rental property management suffers, so does the property owner. Great deals can be found from landlords who are just overwhelmed. Plus they often own more than one property. Number 7, bandit signs, voicemail blast. There are bandit signs where you post your signs around the neighborhood or marketing using a voicemail blasting service. These types of marketing will certainly increase the hostile responses that you get, especially bandit signs. And by hostile, I mean expect calls that make you feel like someone plans on coming to hurt you. And they're not legal everywhere, so you got to be really careful with that. It's also hard to establish trust with a seller if you use any kind of marketing in a manner that feels less than honorable to them. My deals come from people trusting me. They have a problem I can solve, and it's win-win. Okay, number 8, websites, SEO, and pay-per-click. I highly recommend that you have a website. A website can act as your lead funnel, where all the leads might be sent into where you can better manage them. It might be from direct mail, bandit sign, or let's just say maybe a business card. A website can further your sales message. It can have a frequently asked questions section that can save you time having to answer questions It can filter your leads for you. And you can easily change the message on the site at any point. The next level would be to attempt to have the site itself bring you property leads. For that, you will need to have the site come up when people search for ways to sell their homes. Your site would need to have very good SEO, where work goes into the site to make it come up naturally or organically, or you would do pay-per-click, where you pay search engines to show your site when people search certain terms. Both options can be productive, but they both tend to be very expensive, costing thousands of dollars depending on your market. I once read a frequently asked question that Google had on a site of theirs that answered the question, how can my competitors pay so much for a lead? Google's response was that many of your competitors have no idea their spending is at a loss for them. At that, I'm going to wrap this up. I've got several podcasts that dive deep into many of these lead strategies specifically, and I'll be adding more. It's important that you comment on this podcast and add value here with your own thoughts. It helps create a dialogue, and it fills in the gaps on anything that I missed or things you might know better than I. It's also a very good place to get answers. This is a community where we build together. On that, I'm Joe White. This is the Grow Real Estate Management Podcast, and happy investing.